Welcome to my channel, Delightful Stories. I'll be happy if you subscribe to my channel and like it. Enjoy watching and don't forget to leave your opinion in the comments about the story. John changed the water bucket one last time and returned to the corridor of the office he was cleaning. The sun had already set and the streets were plunged into dusk, which meant that he had missed the last bus. The office building was downtown. He lived on the outskirts, where transportation was rare and always crowded. Now John had nowhere to hurry. He could take the subway, so the boy quietly finished cleaning the corridor. After washing all the rags and sponges, he hung them up in his inconspicuous closet and began to change his clothes. The lad never thought that, at his 23 years of age, he would be scrubbing the floors of some firm instead of working in his profession or opening his own business, as it was now fashionable. Life was always unfair to John, and to a certain extent he accepted it, not dreaming of more. The boy's childhood was difficult. He lost his father early, so only his mother took over his upbringing. Fragile and delicate in appearance, Helen proved to be resilient, stubborn, and loving. The boy was grateful to her for all that his mother did for him, but sometimes she went overboard with her love and tutelage. Even now, the woman could control his life and decide what he should do. The son did not feel independent, and failures at work drove him into a dreary existence. He had only minimal education. His finances prevented him from going any higher, and he was not able to enroll in a state-financed program. Helen's efforts alone were not enough to provide his son the future he dreamed of. The boy saw himself as a design engineer. All his childhood lessons drew buildings and ships, invented unusual buildings. But the future was not as bright as it had been in John's life. With the exception of his mother, he had no close friend. At school, he was often bullied and called a loser because of his clothes and used textbooks. Over time, nothing changed in the boy's life. He was categorized as a loser and didn't want to run into his classmates in janitor's uniform and prove it. He had no friends. The only friend, after his service, decided to pursue a military career and stayed in another county, then got a spouse and child, rarely making himself known. As John exited the building, the fresh March air blew over his face. The guy's job was demanding, but he rejoiced in such moments when he could walk to transportation in peace and enjoy the views of the city. He often withdrew into his thoughts, dreaming, imagining a better life, how he would meet the love of his life or suddenly get rich. And then he smiled at his own silly thoughts. He was plucked from his fantasies by a phone call from his mother. "Son, where the hell have you been? I was exhausted. I told you that I will be late again the day after tomorrow. The firm negotiations and the boss asked me to polish so as not to fall into the mud. You didn't sit down to dinner without me." "Yes, I remember. But it's late, and you were supposed to be home 2 hours ago. Who's going to pay you for your overtime? Everyone's writing you, and not enough. I've been saying for a long time that it's time to look for another job. Let's talk about it later. I don't have the energy or inclination for that right now. Yes, I'll take the subway, don't worry." He was tired of his mother's constant discontent. She kept waiting for him to make it in the world, to become a powerful man. His mother couldn't stand the fact that he scrubbed floors in front of hundreds of people for a living. Helen thought it was a shameful occupation, unworthy of her son, but she didn't realize that John was having a hard time making it either. They didn't pay him much, but every organization he went to after graduation told him they needed someone with a college degree. He held on to his job even though he was ashamed of it. The staff in the office was not the best. They didn't get along very well with each other, and the janitor, who was considered inferior to them, was treated rudely. Oliver, the trainee who might not stay with the company in the future, hurt him the most. The guys were the same age, and the intern tried to show the difference between them by making fun of the janitor for the amusement of his older colleagues. "Hot window divorce is unacceptable," Oliver repeated at the sight of the janitor. Well, what does he get paid for? We're a serious organization. No one's slacking here. He's lucky they got him to mop the floors, or he'd be sitting on the street with his hand outstretched. With his hand outstretched. Leave the guy alone. Leave the guy alone. Let him work. Let him work. Someone from the office plankton told him, don't forget you've got a lot of work to do, or you'll be out in no time. John never minded. He was afraid of losing his job, even after hearing some hurtful things about himself. Even though it wasn't the most desirable, he always needed the money. As he descended the steps to the subway, John noticed a girl beggar wandering in the underpass. She was dressed modestly. The clothes were clearly not hers, and she looked miserable. He didn't recognize her from afar, but then stopped dead in his tracks. She was like an obsession. Her features were strikingly familiar. But how could this happen? How did Alice end up here? Why was she dressed like that? Why was she pestering passers-by with her palm outstretched pitifully? The boy's heart squeezed with an agonizing longing. A year had passed, and he could not forget the one with whom, though briefly, he had been happy, with whom he planned to tie his life if his mother had not interfered. They had met in college. The girl was a year younger and had grown up on the outskirts of town, living with her mother in a rented apartment. They immediately reached out to each other as if they sensed their similarity and they didn't misunderstand. After a few walks, it became clear to both of them that there was something between them. John walked around, elated and smiling stupidly. He found a part-time job to please the girl with gifts. Only his mother did not like the change in her son. She immediately realized that he had a lover and began to question him. Who is she? When will you introduce us? Mummy, be patient. I will introduce you. You will like Alice for sure, the boy justified with embarrassment. Not used to sharing his love experiences with his mother. His mother was the only friend he had. He could talk about anything, but he'd never encountered feelings like that before. I hope she's a decent girl, and you don't bring anyone else into the house. But when John invited Alice to dinner with her mother, it turned into a nightmare. Helen didn't like the girl right away. She constantly reprimanded her, making her son's sweetheart blush and embarrassed. A flustered Alice carelessly knocked over a glass of wine on the woman's favorite tablecloth, which enraged her. You son of a bitch, quick, get it off the table. She needs to be soaked. Rascal, give me that. Helen snatched the tablecloth from the dazed girl's hands and ran to the bathroom. God, what have I done? Alice sat down on the floor in tears. I made her angry. Your mother is going to hate me. She didn't like me at all. Don't worry. It's only a rag. It's nothing. As John comforted her. But knowing the difficult nature of his mother, he knew they will have a hard time. The girl tried to make amends and came to the house with gifts for Helen, but the woman did not respond to the bribes. She did not skimp on insults, constantly belittling her in the eyes of her son. Alice endured 5 months and left John. Honey, wait. Give us one more chance, please. I love you. I want to live with you, but I can't leave her. Understand, her boyfriend pleaded with her when her beloved announced the breakup. I can't. Don't ask me. I've had enough. I feel terrible. I can't take it anymore. John had a hard time getting over his breakup with his beloved. He did not quarrel with Helen, but he constantly snapped and argued. He understood that his mother had divorced him from his love, but he could not confront her openly, blaming himself daily for it. And now the boy's former love was walking around in front of him in the brightly lit crosswalk. Unhappy, hungry, with a trace of exhaustion and despair on her face. John even questioned his eyesight and blinked often in the hope that the vision would dispel. For months Alice had been seen in the faces of passers-by. Sometimes he mistook strangers for her, caught up with her on the street, and those darted away. John snapped toward the girl, grabbing her arm. Alice, what happened to you? Why are you doing this? Again, it was an obsession. Surprised eyes opposite, not blue but brown. The facial features are sharper, the lips thinner. That's not Alice. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. The boy paused a couple of steps back, staring at the attractive beggar woman. Are you all right? You look pale. I have water here. She took a half-empty bottle of water from the bag hanging on her shoulder and offered it to him. He declined, looking at the tracksuit with dirty streaks on her skinny figure, out of fashion 10 years ago, the thin, sleeveless jacket from a man's shoulder, and the hat that hid the short, long, unwashed hair. The man felt pity for the beggar, who looked at him sincerely, without fear and with a desire to help. This won him over. Crowds of people jostled past them as they hurried about their business. None of them cared about the beggar who clung to them every day, or the janitor of the firm who had been sick for a minute. John decided that he could not leave her here, among indifferent people who could easily hurt her. How could a pretty young girl stay on the street? Look, I mistook you for an acquaintance of mine. Do you have a place where you can sleep in peace? If not, I'm inviting you to my place. Don't be afraid. And he put his hands out in front of his questions. Don't be like that. I live with my mother, and she won't mind. I can't leave you here alone. You're very trusting, she smiled, and John's heart warmed at once. She was not frightened of him. I am usually driven away from me like a plague. I am embarrassed to agree, but I can't survive another night here. The cops are constantly disturbing me, telling me to get out of the passages, sending me to public shelters. But it's dangerous there. Once they took away all the money I collected during the day and hit me a couple of times so I wouldn't fight back. Can you imagine? And no one helped? Laws of the streets? I'm not kidding. John shook his head. Come on if you dare. The boy's new acquaintance's name was The girl spoke to him openly, talking easily about her hardships and problems, and they didn't seem like complaints. Didn't obligate the guy to take care of her or give him all the money he had in his purse, and he liked that. With each offer the girl made, the faith in people in the guy's heart slowly faded. He had encountered meanness, and more than once, but he had not guessed at some peculiarities of human nature. How did you end up in this position? He asked timidly, realizing that he was starting an unpleasant subject. It's hard to believe something like this could happen to any of us. There's no guessing about it. Anne sighed and pulled her hat even lower, as if she were hiding from the world. You're right, she smiled bitterly. It's not an easy thing to come to terms with. I understand your interest. You ought to know who you're taking into the house. What if I am a thief or a swindler? I'm not offended. I'd be worried about that myself in the first place. John listened intently to the vague story of his new acquaintance. She had only recently been orphaned. However, it would make anyone lose themselves and get confused. Only the girl's parents were not loving, not shaking for their child. They gave their free time to drinking in the company of similar alcoholics. The girl's childhood was spent in terrible conditions, quarrels, fights, hunger, poverty. There was a constant lack of money at home. Her father was kicked out of work for being late and not showing up for shifts, and my mother for allowing herself to show up drunk. Occasional earnings helped to get some money for a bottle and a meager snack, and everything started all over again. Anne grew up quiet and timid, not wanting to draw attention to herself. I finished school with difficulty. I had nothing to pay for a tutor, and I took exams by myself, trying to understand the material, and my parents were not interested in my life. They were waiting for me to get a job and provide them with money. I had nowhere to go. I worked here and there, and almost all of my salary was taken from me by my family. And recently my mother and father burned in a fire, got drunk again, and fell asleep with a lit cigarette. I lost their roof over my head and all my meager savings and belongings. I have no other relatives. That's how I ended up on the street. He noticed some inconsistencies in the story, but didn't pay much attention to it. He shouldn't have expected honesty from a homeless woman. She didn't seem hopeless to him. The girl might have been ashamed to reveal her true past, and there was little pleasure in begging on the streets. It didn't make a difference. The boy still took her to his apartment, wishing that her acquaintance had spent at least one night in warmth and tranquility. "I'm sorry you had to go through all this," as the fellow said with sincere sympathy. "You've been a victim of circumstances, but there is still time to start over and let today be the first step. I'm not a rich man myself. I have to save money, but I have faith in the best. Thank you. It's been a long time since I've had a heart talk with anyone. I don't have any friends, you know. All I could think about was how to live another day." Seeing the trusting face of such a fragile but strong in spirit girl, he felt responsible for her and promised himself he would not leave Anne in need. He would find ways to help her. The boy approached the driveway in excitement. He decided on his own to bring the stray to spend the night, intending to leave her for a while, but he had not consulted his mother. Helen did not like uninvited guests, and her son knew that she would not be thrilled at the sight of a girl from the street. "Mom, we have guests," the boy said as he opened the door of the apartment and let Anne into the hallway. "Thank God I was waiting. Who's there with you?" Helen came out of the kitchen in a wheelchair. The girl blinked her eyes at a loss, not knowing what to say. John had not warned her on purpose so that she would not refuse to go with him. He thought it would scare her off, make her think he had enough trouble as it was. His mother's misfortune had happened last winter. She was coming out of the stairwell, slipped on the steps and fell on her back. She screamed loudly from the sharp pain. "And how did you end up in this position?" he asked timidly, realizing that he was starting an unpleasant subject. "It's hard to believe something like this could happen to any of us. There's no guessing about it." Anne sighed and pulled her hat even lower, as if she were hiding from the world. "You're right," she smiled bitterly. "It's not an easy thing to come to terms with. I understand your interest. You ought to know who you're taking into the house. What if I am a thief or a swindler? I'm not offended. I'd be worried about that myself in the first place." John listened intently to the vague story of his new acquaintance. She had only recently been orphaned. However, it would make anyone lose themselves and get confused. Only the girl's parents were not loving, not shaking for their child. They gave their free time to drinking in the company of similar alcoholics. The girl's childhood was spent in terrible conditions: quarrels, fights, hunger, poverty. There was a constant lack of money at home. Her father was kicked out of work for being late and not showing up for shifts, and my mother for allowing herself to show up drunk. Occasional earnings helped to get some money for a bottle and a meager snack, and everything started all over again. Anne grew up quiet and timid, not wanting to draw attention to herself. "I finished school with difficulty. I had nothing to pay for a tutor, and I took exams by myself, trying to understand the material, and my parents were not interested in my life. They were waiting for me to get a job and provide them with money. I had nowhere to go. I worked here and there, and almost all of my salary was taken from me by my family. And recently my mother and father burned in a fire, got drunk again, and fell asleep with a lit cigarette. I lost their roof over my head and all my meager savings and belongings. I have no other relatives. That's how I ended up on the street." He noticed some inconsistencies in the story, but didn't pay much attention to it. He shouldn't have expected honesty from a homeless woman. She didn't seem hopeless to him. The girl might have been ashamed to reveal her true past, and there was little pleasure in begging on the streets. It didn't make a difference. The boy still took her to his apartment, wishing that her acquaintance had spent at least one night in warmth and tranquility. "I'm sorry you had to go through all this," the fellow said with sincere sympathy. "You've been a victim of circumstances, but there is still time to start over, and let today be the first step. I'm not a rich man myself. I have to save money, but I have faith in the best. Thank you. It's been a long time since I've had a heart talk with anyone. I don't have any friends, you know. All I could think about was how to live another day. Seeing the trusting face of such a fragile but strong in spirit girl, he felt responsible for her and promised himself he would not leave Anne in need. He would find ways to help her. The boy approached the driveway in excitement. He decided on his own to bring the stray to spend the night, intending to leave her for a while, but he had not consulted his mother. Helen did not like uninvited guests, and her son knew that she would not be thrilled at the sight of a girl from the street. "Mom, we have guests," the boy said as he opened the door of the apartment and let Anne into the hallway. "Thank God I was waiting. Who's there with you?" Helen came out of the kitchen in a wheelchair. The girl blinked her eyes at a loss, not knowing what to say. John had not warned her on purpose so that she would not refuse to go with him. He thought it would scare her off, make her think he had enough trouble as it was. His mother's misfortune had happened last winter. She was coming out of the stairwell, slipped on the steps, and fell on her back. She screamed loudly from the sharp pain, and she started crying for help, unable to move. The frightened neighbors called for help. At the hospital, the boy learned that her mother was paralyzed from the waist down, and that from now on her legs would be in a wheelchair. The energetic and determined woman had a hard time accepting the consequences of the injury. She was furious and wanted to channel her emotions somewhere, intending to sue the management company that had allowed this to happen, but the family had no money for that. All her savings went to pay for rehabilitation procedures and expensive medications to help her cope with her phantom limb pain. Since then, she had become more suspicious, more aggressive. John suffered because of her difficult disposition, as did Alice, who could not stand the constant taunting. "Hello. Sorry for the late intrusion. Mother, this is Anne. She was in a difficult situation, and I offered her a bed for the night." The boy paid no attention to his mother's displeased face. A serious conversation was inevitable. The woman, busily crossing her arms across her chest, turned toward the kitchen. "Wash your hands and come to the table. I'll put another plate on the table." Dinner passed in an atmosphere of awkwardness. Anne was uncomfortable under the woman's heavy gaze. Several times she wanted to get up and leave so as not to cause him problems. But every time he stopped her with a glance or started a conversation. I want to discuss something important with both of you. And I suggest you stay with us for a few weeks. Take a rest, find a job, and we'll decide on the housing later when you start earning money." Tears glistened in Anne's eyes at these words. She wanted to refuse at once, but her throat refused to listen. She could not believe in the kindness of the boy, in his faith in her, because she had not seen sympathy to herself for a long time. "Mother, I want to ask you to be patient and give our guest a chance for a new life. I know you're not happy, but make an effort for once." Helen could barely contain herself from the comment. Inside, she was seething. She couldn't wait to pounce on her son for his bad idea, but in response, she said sternly, "First, Anne should take a shower and get cleaned up. I put my things in the hall on the couch." As soon as the girl was in the bathroom, she attacked her son. "How could you bring that bum into our apartment? Are you out of your mind? You get her out of here tomorrow, and don't forget to check our drawers and caskets. She's a real thief. She charms you, and then she steals from you. There's nothing left to take. And you, Mother, calm down. I can vouch for her. Nobody's safe from that kind of thing. You know how easily life changes, and you can't be sure of anything. Just let her stay and don't hurt her. Please, I know you'll get her to leave on her own, just like Alice did." "You don't need Alice. Forget her already. Stop thinking about love. It's time to get smart. I didn't work 2 jobs so you could pick up homeless girls. I spent my health on you so they could help you get out in the world. If you introduce me to a girl from a decent family, I won't say a word against you." "Who'd want me like this?" shouted John out. He couldn't stand it. "You say that over and over again as if I were nothing. I am your son." Why can't you think about what I want? I'm not a commodity that a rich fool has to like, so she'll want to jump out and marry me and spend money on us. I'll live modestly but by myself, and leave her alone. I'm going to bed." Anne stood in front of the bathroom door for a while, to let the owners of the apartment cool down and disperse. She was already regretting her decision to stay here for the night, but it had been so long since she'd slept in a soft bed, eaten hot, delicious food, and seen a kind look on her face that she could not give up the pleasure. Life with Helen seemed like hell, for the girl was well acquainted with this type of person. She had seen all kinds of people on the street. When Anne made up her mind to go out into the hall, where the bed was already made for her, she saw John hunched over the table. "I'm sorry you weren't supposed to hear that," he sighed as she sat down next to him. "This is all because of me. I won't be here much longer. Really, I don't want you fighting with your mom because of me, because she loves you. I'll get over it. Come on, it's not you. Mom's always been like this. We have a complicated relationship. Let's forget it. Tomorrow after my work, we'll go to the mall, get you something for your interview, update your closet." Anne had been living in the apartment for the 4th day. All through his work shift, all he could think about was how he would get back to her and rescue her from her mother, who he was sure was endlessly occupying his guest. Anne turned out to be patient, malleable. She knew at once. Helen was not to be trifled with, and she tried to pay for her shelter with her labor. The girl was inept at household chores, but she learned quickly and tried hard. Her mother could not help it, constantly reprimanding the girl. But she was not rude and in response, catching every word she said, interrogating and coping. It was not without pleasure that the woman watched her as she walked around the house with a broom and rags, as she fidgeted at the stove, groomed herself, inquired about her well-being, and offered to help in everything, without sparing herself. "Mother, could you not use her as a slave? Anne is our guest, not our servant." John was indignant as he watched his mother pester the girl with petty requests, not letting her sit still. "What have I done again? The girl wants to help herself. I, as you know, am limited in many ways. She doesn't do well, but she will learn in time." The mother answered with an innocent look. The boy tried to take Anne out for a walk every night. By the end of the day, everyone was exhausted, but they enjoyed walking slowly down the lighted streets. It was easy for the young people to be with each other. Anne was laughing and fixing her neatly styled hair. The clothes John had bought her the day before sat perfectly and advantageously, accentuating her feminine figure. The boy kept staring at her attractive curves, at the delicate fingers, at the sparkle in her eyes. With him, the girl felt safe for the first time in many months. No longer did she need to think about where to sleep, where to get food, who she would have to fight. At the end of the 2nd week of dating, a guy got an advance payment and decided to take her on a real date to a small restaurant, which discussed on the break colleagues. To them, the establishment was no different from a bunch of others. They could afford to dine there all the time. But for the janitor, this evening was special. He couldn't get the image of the tramp out of his head. He thought about her for days on end, wanted to help her out, to like her, to impress her. When the girl saw the lights of the garland under the sign of the establishment, she clapped her hands, looking at them with an incomprehensible longing. "Is everything all right?" He touched her shoulder. "Yes, it's very pretty here. I didn't mean to embarrass you. It's not exactly a grand restaurant, but it's cozy. I thought you might like it." The arrangement of the tables inside allowed all the guests to stay in privacy, thanks to the partitions. The kitchen, as well as the furnishings, turned out to be beautiful. The boys expressed their raptures without ceasing and washed everything down with red wine. After eating, the girl leaned back in her chair with her glass and sipped her drink slowly. It was the first time he had seen her so relaxed, with a playful blush and a slight smile. "The view from here is incredible," she whispered, staring out the window. "I could have captured it on paper. I couldn't live a day at school without my sketchbook. I drew in every class. Teachers constantly called my parents asking them to influence me. But nothing changed. I haven't picked up a pencil in years. I used to be so into drawing that I couldn't see or hear anything around me." "I thought you were creative," John smiled. "You are very carefree, and I would like to see you so relaxed more often." Anne laughed loudly, and several heads in the hall turned in their direction, and the boy thought he was ready to listen to that laughter forever. He felt like he had known the girl for years. It had been a long time since the boy had felt this way, and he was afraid of where it might lead. The girl had always expressed her gratitude to him, but nothing spoke of her sympathy. John could only hope and patiently pursue her favor. After paying the bill, they wandered the streets for a while. The girl allowed herself to be taken by the hand. As they crossed the road, she sang something to herself, having fun. Her companion was happy that he could give her these feelings, that he helped her remember what life could be like. And he himself had long since forgotten about falling in love. As he tried diligently to explain to the girl the location of the stars in the constellation, pointing to the sky where almost nothing was visible, the girl suddenly appeared before him and briefly pressed her lips together. "What was that for?" The boy was perplexed. "For bringing me back to life." The mother's keen eyes could see that something was going on between her son and the tramp. She noticed that all the conversations fell silent in front of her, that the young people did not look each other in the eye, and in the evenings it was impossible to wait for them. John would take his guest away right after dinner, and they would return before midnight. The woman knew. Her son was deceived. It was necessary to do something urgently. She had put up with this con artist for a long time, and now she decided to survive. "How long will you sit on our necks?" No shame at all. All she can do is hang around my son and bat her eyes at him. "What have you done for our family?" The woman started the conversation while the girl was tidying up the kitchen. She stood there with a towel and a plate in her hands. "We would have washed the dishes ourselves, but who will pay the rent? You've made a good job of it. I'll give you that. You're taking advantage of my son. I'll give you everything. You know that I go to interviews. But they won't hire me because I don't have papers. I owe you everything, and I won't forget it. I promise. There will be money soon." Helen sniggered back with a jealous and disgruntled look and hurried off. "Slacker, remember, my kindness does not last forever." After a brief argument with the woman, the girl always came hard. She set her plate on the table so she wouldn't let it out of her shaking hands. It amazed her how such an unsociable and angry woman could have had such a sincere and open son. Within a few days, she was hired as a waitress. She did not work every day, but only on celebrations, where more staff was needed for better service. At first, the girl found it very difficult. The staff supported her, but each shift was incredibly exhausting. She would go back to her apartment after midnight, when the woman was already asleep and could not spoil the mood. The girl would simply collapse on the couch, carefully spread out by her boyfriend. She was too lazy to change her clothes or talk to anyone, and the guy would wait for his beloved after each shift and make her eat. "You shouldn't go back there again. Money for money, but you're just killing yourself." He kneaded Anne's shoulders as she picked at the stew with her spoon, exhausted. "Your mother is right. I can't rely on anyone forever. I have to take care of myself," she mumbled. "Did she put you up to this? What did she tell you?" "Look," John sat down across the table and took the girl's hands in his. "You don't owe me anything. I decided to help you myself. It's not hard for me. You just find something to do. I don't mind if you do. Your hands are rough. Look at the cuts on your fingers and your feet. They're swollen. Don't scream, it's all right. I'm not a little girl and I can earn my own money. It's a matter of self-respect. Understand?" You're not my spouse. I can't afford to provide for myself. Anne rested her forehead on the guy's shoulder, and he put his arm around her, pulling her closer. Promise me you won't go to the banquet hall this weekend and we'll sleep through dinner together. We'll have a nice meal and go for a walk. We need to spend the money we've earned. Anne was gone all day at work, unable to see Helen's displeased face. She hoped the woman would stop snapping and calm down when she started getting money from her, but that didn't happen. The woman was angry that she was clinging like a leech to her son. There was no hiding their relationship, and she knew that her son was in love with this swindler, who was bound to cheat them and laugh at them. I do not approve of your choice, she declared to her son when Anne left for her shift. Just think about who you're messing with. You don't know anything. What if she's sick, a convict? What if she's dangerous after all? And you let this suspicious wench be alone with your paralyzed mother. You let this suspicious wench be alone with your paralyzed mother. I'm completely defenseless. Once the boy let his mother take his happiness away from him, he won't let it happen again. Mother, stop it. I don't want to hear anything. You're not being fair to her. She's a good person and would never hurt anyone. She has changed my life. I am a better person. I think about my future. I want to change jobs. I want to see what I'm worth. She inspired me, not you. So leave him alone. With these words, he rushed out of the apartment to calm his nerves and not to say big, mean things to his mother. His mother looked after him, choking back tears. She could not believe that John had grown so ungrateful. The boy had never yelled at his mother before. He was so angry with her that he tried to spend as little time at home as possible. He devoted his whole self to the girl, who always made him feel welcome. She allowed him to believe in himself, to dream, to make plans together. On nights when his mother fell asleep and no longer showed up in the apartment hallway, he would sneak into the girl's room, and they could talk about the future for hours. Sometimes the girl would laugh because John would rush through his dreams, talking about their house in the suburbs, about a small vegetable garden, a cat and a dog, which they would certainly have. For days, secretly from her son and her guest, her mother would visit his room and rummage through the closet for what she needed. Now John's old photographs and his letters to Alice lay in a drawer in the room, waiting to be found. On the girl's day off, when her son had gone to work, the woman drove into the hall where Anne was resting and spoke. Don't get too upset, but I'll open your eyes since you're blind yourself. I'm tired, honestly. I'm so tired of the constant bickering with you. I don't have the strength for it. Leave me alone, please. She could not stand arguments with a woman, could not be rude to the mother of the man she loved. Here, she tossed on the couch, ribboned photographs of the couple, and the letters the boy had sent to his former lover in the hope of winning her back. The letters were personal, imbued with pain and remorse. Alice never got in touch with him, but she didn't know that it was a girl, gazed into John's happy face next to another, and didn't know what to think where it came from. Why are you showing me this? This is Alice, John's fiancée. You're just a cheapskate he felt sorry for. They've been together for 3 years. Alice is smart. She's studying in the capital, and John is waiting for her. They write to each other. See, he loves her, and he needs you to keep him entertained. No, that's not true. Didn't you hear Anne say it? Tears streamed down her cheeks, and she had no time to wipe them away. John couldn't help but lie. I could tell. I could feel it. He told you about his friends, introduced you to them, triumphantly declared Helen. She was a rather unhappy-looking Anne. The girl bought it. Now she's finally being taken out of their lives. Go away yourself. Keep your dignity. If Alice finds you out not to be married, John will be very hurt to lose her. And if you love him, leave him alone. Understand you're not right for him. He just got carried away. It's not serious. Get my son out of your head. I can't think of anything. Anne jumped up from her seat. She couldn't stay in that apartment any longer. couldn't smell John on her hair, couldn't stand his mother's haughty face that day after day she was mocked. The girl grabbed her bag from the chair. Quickly dressing, she ran out of the apartment. She didn't know where to go. Everything was jumbled in her head. John had betrayed her. He had taken advantage of her. What to do now? The son, who had returned in the evening, did not suspect a thing. He entered the apartment with 2 bouquets of flowers. It was their 1-month anniversary that day. The boy wanted to do her a favor, but also not to offend his mother. After all, she was already in no mood to be friends with her son's girlfriend. "Hello, my dears. Where are you all? Why such silence?" He found Helen in the hall, triumphantly watching TV in the place of his beloved. "And where is Anne? Was she called to work?" "She's gone." "What are you talking about? Mom, what happened?" The boy immediately went pale, looking firmly at his mother. He knew that she had something to do with it. Just like that, she grabbed her bag and ran off at lunchtime, after her shower. I caught her rummaging through my box and I threatened the police. So she took off fast. "You're lying. You made that up to break us up?" "No, son. I warned you it wouldn't do any good. The beggar's nature took over. You're the one she's been blowing smoke up your ass. I've seen the whole picture from the beginning." "If anything happens to her, I won't forgive you," he said to the mother in a voice that made her hesitate for a moment. The boy slammed the front door loudly and in a panic headed for the subway station where he first met the girl. The search was unsuccessful, though he ran around the subway for hours. He returned home angry and powerless. Because of her wandering life, she knew the city well and could hide on purpose so that no one would see her. Every new day brought him nothing but disappointment. He hardly spoke to his mother, angry because everything had happened because of her. Only the woman did not consider herself guilty. Her son stunted. Before her eyes, he became his pale copy and moved around the apartment as a shadow. He was no longer interested in anything. He got up and went to work on automatic. He did not talk to anyone in the office. He forgot to eat and did not even feel hungry. All he felt was an unquenchable longing for his beloved. Every day he wandered the subway for a long time, asking passers-by about his beloved, showing the pictures that remained on his phone. Pictures of the happy days when they both enjoyed each other and made plans. He often saw her in the crowd. He called out to her, asked her to stop, and in another moment her silhouette dissolved, and the boy realized it was just a vision. Many people in the office squinted at him because he had become inattentive and abrupt. Even the man who had been promoted from intern to full-fledged employee no longer dared to mock him. One day they were even separated in the corridor, and the head of the department called him in and told both of them off, threatening to fire them. "Fire me, I don't care," the guy replied, not being afraid of the boss's decision. "I know my job, and there aren't many people who want my job. I will not tolerate the nagging of those who have no authority to supervise me." The head of the department could only make both guys apologize to each other. That's all. In the middle of another week, at the beginning of the workday, a janitor deep in thought bumped into a stranger right in front of the stairs. She flew into the bucket and flew down the steps, splashing dirty water all over the sides. She gave a loud groan and looked around in horror at what she had done. "My God," she shrieked, and the boy was ready to object to her inattention, but she spoke quickly. "I'm sorry, I beg you. I am so sorry. I'm in a mad rush. Today is my first day. I have to run. I am indebted to you." He remained in a stupor, staring after her. The janitor was hardly angry, seeing the consternation in the big blue eyes. The girl had added to his workload, but he could live with that. During lunch, Jessica sat down at his table in the firm's dining room and held out a glass of coffee. "It's me again. Sorry about this morning. I wasn't myself. My head was spinning from all this." She rolled her eyes amusedly, and the guy smiled. "You're forgiven. and thanks for the coffee. I can have lunch with you." John hadn't spoken so openly to anyone since his beloved disappeared many months ago. Being alone in the house with his mother was unbearable, and the school friend was bogged down in family worries, unwilling to take on someone else's problem. Communicating with Jessica gave the boy an ease. He became her only friend in an office filled with envy and falsehood. Together they spent lunches and occasionally met on weekends to go to the movies or wander in the park, just to get away from everything. She was cheerful, kind, sincere, and persistent, even though she failed to gain recognition from her colleagues. John noticed her glances turn to him, the unabashed touches, the hints, but could not reciprocate. The lad's heart was still at the mercy of the tramp. He never forgot his beloved for a moment. He often dreamt of her, blamed him for failing to protect her, for not standing up for her mother. In other dreams, the girl did not listen to his apologies, ignored, pretended not to recognize that she did not love. From this he woke up long before the alarm clock and couldn't sleep for a long time. He needed a conversation with her, one meeting to clear everything up. But it was as if the girl had disappeared. He was tired of his life, his work, his surroundings, his mother. How he longed to leave Helen, to leave her. But the woman could not take care of herself. She had put him on his own feet. No one helped her. And that was the only thing stopping his son from moving out. Depression became part of his life. The sadness and hopelessness of existence enveloped the boy with invisible threads. He wanted nothing more. He had lost the ability to dream and didn't believe he could one day be happy when he met someone. Jessica was always there for him, but he didn't want her love and tried to pull away, which only forced her to try harder to be there. The mother could no longer see her son depressed. 3 years ago, she had ruined his happiness with her own hands by deceiving him and forcing the girl to leave. This deed weighed heavily on the woman's soul. She, like her son, did not sleep well and was tormented by an overwhelming sense of guilt. And worst of all, her only child now hated his mother. Helen could no longer tolerate it. Her son avoided her company, and after work, either locked himself in his room or left and did not return until she went to bed. All conversations boiled down to domestic problems and the woman's trips to the doctor. Several times she tried to lighten her load. She thought that now she would tell her son about everything, that she could earn his trust and forgiveness, but she didn't have the guts. One day fear receded in the face of her child's unhappy face. She made up her mind. "Son, please stay." She stopped him by taking him by the hand when he returned from work, put the groceries in the refrigerator, and decided to lock himself in his room. "Give me a chance to talk to you. I don't deserve it, but you're kinder than I am. Please talk to me. I can't run after you for obvious reasons." The boy stared at his mother with a frown. They looked at each other for a while, and his face softened. He sat down at the table and crossed his arms over his chest. "What do you want?" "You have already guessed. It doesn't have to be explained because I'm the one who screwed her over. I am very sorry, and I am very sorry." Tears came to her eyes, and she drew a handkerchief from the pocket of her knitted blouse. "I cannot bear to see what has become of you. It hurts so much. Forgive me, my son. Forgive me, my dear. I didn't mean you any harm. I didn't mean you any harm. I thought it would be better this way. You wouldn't have left her without my interference. She's an honest girl. She's never lied to us. She's just a clever girl, a golden girl. And I'm not surprised you fell in love with her. You were very suited to each other. I wish I could take that back." The mother waited for a reaction, but her son looked at her with blank, moist eyes. The boy held his temper as best he could, but he couldn't get any more angry. He had plenty of time to blame everything on his mother. He resented and reveled in that feeling. It made him feel better. But now she was sincerely remorseful, and his heart ached at the sight of her face. "What can I tell you? You are right about one thing. Nothing can be returned." And John cried. It had been so hard for him these years. He didn't even realize he had so many feelings pent up inside him. He was shaking with his arms around his head. His mother pulled the stroller closer, and for the first time in 3 years, his son allowed himself to be hugged. "I won't interfere anymore. Son, I've learned my lesson. Your happiness is more important to me. I won't interfere with you. You're an adult. You've been taking care of me for a long time, and you can decide who to love and who to live with. Jessica is a good girl, judging from your stories, and I would be glad if you got to know us." The woman stroked her son's back and hair. "I will accept her as my own daughter and never hurt her. Just don't do anything else for me. I can't stand it. I don't want her mother. I love Anne, but I can't find her now." A week passed after this conversation. The relationship between them improved considerably. It turned out that the boy needed his mother to apologize. He wanted her to realize her mistake and stop controlling his life. Both were relieved now, and after her son returned from work, she would get a kiss and a warm greeting from him. She was still afraid she hadn't done enough to earn her son's forgiveness, so she pampered him with his favorite meals and baked goods. The boy began to feel freer, and for the first time in a long time, decided it was time for a change. He could not work all his life as a janitor. He wanted to respect himself. He discussed the matter with his mother, and she was not against it. "It's about time, son," she said. "Don't worry, I'll support you. I save a little from my pension every month in case I ever save up for an operation." "Mom, I can't take it. It's your money, you hope." "I'm your mom, and I can't take away your dream of doing things that make you happy. You deserve it." The boy accepted his mother's help. He had his own savings to take a course in architectural design. With a light heart the next day, he visited his supervisor's office, where he gave notice of his dismissal and then went to the Human Resources Department and processed his application according to all the rules. The last time he had felt such joy was when he hugged his beloved, and now he was smiling, anticipating his new life. All the faces of the office workers would soon be erased from his memory, but not Jessica's face. The guy told his girlfriend about leaving the firm over lunch. "What? Is it really true?" she asked, pressing her hand to her trembling lips. "I'm sorry it was so sudden." "I'm the one who should apologize for being so sudden." The decision came spontaneously. I didn't plan it, but it was time to let it all go and face my dream. He patted the girl on the shoulder, but the gesture only made her more upset. "Listen to me, I know everything. I have noticed your feelings for a long time. You have become someone close to me and more than once helped me out. I cherish our friendship, but I can't give you more than that. You're wonderful, honestly. I'm not saying this to make you feel better, and you're bound to be happy. You're like a ray of sunshine in bad weather, you know. It's impossible not to love you. One day the right person will notice you. I'm sorry if I offended you in any way, but it's better for you if we stop seeing each other. I know you're right, but it's so hard to give it up." She understood her friend well, and she shared his decision. 2 weeks later, when the office was empty, the boy hugged her one last time and left without turning around. The mother watched with pride and joy as her son left for class each day in good spirits. The boy was glowing with pleasure and kept talking about his successes. "This is so exciting. Our teacher is wonderful. There are a lot of students my age, and I've become friends with some of them. They're so easy. I'm right in my element. I can't be shut up if there's a discussion." The boy told her at dinner, "We go out to lunch together. There's even a dining room. Can you believe it? And the more I get to know these guys, the more I want to spend time with them." The woman laughed, seeing her son so excited and enthusiastic. "Are there girls in the group?" He immediately lowered his eyes to his plate. "There are girls. What can you do without them? But I'm not interested. We're just talking about classes. No flirting. I'm not ready to start anything yet. I have other things on my mind." On Friday, On his way back from class on a warm evening, he noticed a big black SUV with tinted windows in the yard of his house again. The boy had been watching it for days, but had not seen anyone nearby. This seemed suspicious to him because his mother had never told him anything. Usually she, having listened to the gossip in the driveway, knew everything about the tenants who had just moved in and all the neighbors' news about their problems and acquisitions. John walked by, enjoying the last October sunshine, and decided to take his mother out for a walk. They rarely went outside together, and after the girl left, it was only a few times. "Where did that black car come from?" his mother asked, wrapping a light scarf around her coat while he helped her put on her boot. "Who knows? It's been parked here for a week." As soon as the family showed themselves outside, the back doors of the car opened. Two large men in black suits got out. One of them gave one of them a hand, and with his help appeared in front of them. The girl had impeccable hair and makeup. A chic caramel-colored coat hung over her shoulders, and her long fingernails were adorned with jeweled rings. The clatter of her leather boots' high heels echoed through the courtyard on the outskirts of town. "Anne," the boy froze like a stone. "I can't believe my eyes. How are you look like that?" "Well, hello." "Hello?" The girl stood in front of me. "Hello, Helen. Is it really you? How I've missed you." The boy moved forward, wanting to embrace her, but the two thugs immediately got close to him and grabbed his arms. "It is all right. Let him go." The men obediently backed away. "What is the meaning of this? Who is this?" He was ready to faint with happiness at the sight of his beloved. But she had changed since the last time they had met. "My mother told me everything," she told on me. "I didn't have another girl. I didn't betray you." "It's my fault, children." The astonished mother spoke up. "Forgive me, I have divorced you, turned you against each other. I know everything, and I did not come to settle a relationship." Anne smiled for the first time, and the boy was convinced that this confident and cold-looking girl is his sweetheart. "I wanted to come up to you at the beginning of the week, but you looked so happy that I got scared, thinking that you got married or something." "I have no one," he blurted out at once, and his companion laughed. "We have a lot to talk about. It would be better if we did it in a pleasant place. Would you like to go to a restaurant and discuss it there?" Mother and son looked at each other and agreed. The men in suits carefully got the woman into the car. The young men were beside each other. For the first time in 3 years, the boy was able to take the girl's hand. He was still unconscious and had no idea what was going on. He could only smile, looking at his gorgeous beloved, beaming with the scent of expensive perfume. The SUV stopped outside the very restaurant where Joe had first taken her. "Do you like it?" she asked, and the boy nodded with a broad smile. The company chose a cozy table in the corner, and the receptionist obligingly offered the mother a plaid and helped cover their feet, while the waiters quickly brought drinks and desserts. "Did you suspect something from the beginning?" "I haven't been honest with either of you. My father, though it's hard to believe, is a millionaire, and both he and I had a powerful temper. He rarely showed affection, and I was not the model of an obedient daughter. I had been spoiled all my childhood, and I was used to living without a care in the world. But I knew that in the future, my parents' business would be mine. 5 years ago, my mother passed away, and my father brought my stepmother into the house. I rebelled. Mom had just passed away, and her husband had already stopped grieving and was thinking of marrying a second time." Anne paused, took a sip of her coffee drink, and continued. "The relationship with her didn't work out. She pretended to be a goody-goody and kissed me, but she was aloof and rude without my father. So many times I tried to talk sense into him, to prove what kind of snake he was harboring. And she played the same game against me. I lost. My father took my stepmother's side, and she turned him against me. We fought a lot. And once again, After hearing a lot of accusations from my father, I could not stand it and left. I was emotional at the time, and I didn't immediately realize that I had gone out without my purse, which always contained my credit cards, money, keys, and documents. At first, I thought I could survive on my own because I had a bunch of friends, but none of them supported me. No one would take me anywhere without money or documents, so we wandered around. By the time you saw me, I'd been wandering the streets for 2 months, and I'd seen all kinds of things. They talked for a long time. The woman invited her son's beloved to dinner, and the girl agreed to cross the threshold of that apartment again, where it all began. She told him that she had been living in squalor all this time, renting a room half and half with a waitress. She earned a living where no papers were required. Work was irregular, so there were always problems with money. Dad had recently had a heart attack, and when he realized it was time to stop resenting me, he tracked me down. When I ran away, he went on principle and told none of the employees to let me in the house, and I never once asked to go back. After my heart attack, he hired a private investigator and found me. He was horrified at the conditions I was living in. But nothing. We forgave each other all the wrongs. I'm not angry with him, and I decided to visit you to clear things up. That evening, everyone cried in a circle. Even her mother embraced her, as if she were her own. The girl assured her that she had forgiven her long ago, but the woman would not let up. For a long time, she felt guilty for what she had done. After dinner, the boy went to escort her to the waiting cars in the yard. Now what? He awkwardly swayed, starry-eyed. It's been so long. She interrupted his thoughts by walking up close. Do I always have to do everything myself? The boy knew from her eyes. The fear receded. He took her in his arms and kissed her the way he'd always wanted to. The feelings that had been dying quietly for years burst out, and the two could not part, feeling each other's breath on their faces. How I missed it. I thought I was going to die. I can't believe you're in my arms, as John confessed. It all seems like a dream. A beautiful dream I've never had. I was afraid I'd lost you. Life without you was unbearable too. The couple's intentions were clear to their parents, so the girl's father suggested they finally meet for lunch on the appointed day. He sent a car to the guy's driveway, and the driver drove them to the rich country house. The mother could not contain her emotions. She had always dreamed of living in such a place, and up to a certain point she wanted her son to fulfill her wish by marrying a rich woman. Now the woman was ashamed of her thoughts. The relatives welcomed them in festive clothes, and after a tour of the house seated their guests at a large table, served with family silver and crystal. At first the conversation was not lively, but the boy's mother turned out to be very talkative and managed to impress him. You know, you are a very wise, strong woman. You raised a beautiful son by yourself, about whom my daughter constantly tells me. Stop it. The daughter touched his palm, seeing that the father took a good sip of wine. Topics of conversation found themselves. The atmosphere became relaxed and friendly. No one felt left out. When the parents of the lovers began to discuss the old days, and were not afraid to express their opinions or hurt anyone's feelings, the boy decided the time had come. He rose from his seat, stood between his parents, and took a blue velvet box out of his pocket. Everyone froze. I love your daughter with all my heart and promise to make her happy. That is why I ask for your hand. The man rose from his seat and stretched out his arms to embrace him. You have my blessing on your marriage, my son. He hugged him and then his daughter. You have my blessing, my children. God bless you all. Through her tears the mother spoke. When the boy put the ring on his beloved's finger, and the housekeeper on the sidelines clapped softly, the parents picked up the applause. I have an application too, the bride said, wiping tears from her cheeks. Daddy and I have contacted your doctor and made arrangements for surgery. You will be put on your feet. You will be put on your feet. You will dance with my son at our wedding." "Oh my God, how did you do that?" The newlyweds knelt in front of the stroller and embraced the woman. She never dreamed she would walk again one day. Hope had long since left her. But now she wanted to believe again. The wedding rang out across town 7 months later. By that time, Mom had successfully undergone surgery and overcome a difficult period of rehabilitation. But now she was ready to dance and have fun at the celebration. The bride and groom also found their place in the sun. The girl settled into her father's farm, not allowing her older colleagues to indulge her, and the guy got a design license and was able to get a good job in a good firm, doing what was right in his heart. The wedding reception was not well remembered by the newlyweds. They were plagued with numerous trips, congratulations, relatives, dances, contests, and kisses. "It's a good thing I ran away from home at the time." The girl smiled as she lay in her husband's arms in a bungalow in the islands on her honeymoon. "If it hadn't been for my good heart, we wouldn't have met," teased her spouse, watching a video of their wedding on her phone. "You were dazzling in that dress, my love. You are dazzling now. And even on the subway, I noticed it right away. What do you say we bring our parents a dazzling grandchild from vacation?" She laughed and snuggled up to her husband. The man took that as agreement.